You're listening to Let's Get It On with Big John McCarthy and Sean Wheelock.
Big John McCarthy has witnessed the best that the UFC had to offer.
That is it! Game, set, match! We have a new champion!
Your backstage pass to the world of mixed martial arts and combat sports. Only on the Ignotainment Media Network.
Let's get it on!
Hey everyone, welcome to Let's Get It On with Big John McCarthy and me, Sean Wheelock. Every week on this podcast, John and I give you an inside look at MMA and combat sports, always separating fact from fiction. On this week's program, we'll discuss Conor McGregor's win versus Chad Mendes at last Saturday's UFC 189 in Las Vegas, which gave the Irishman the UFC's interim featherweight title and furthered his superstar claim in MMA. Big John and I will also discuss the co-main event from that card, which John refereed, Robbie Lawler's epic win over Rory MacDonald to retain his UFC welterweight title. And we'll talk about the media reports that the great Fedor Emelianenko, who is now 38 years old, is preparing to make a comeback to mixed martial arts. Plus, as we do on every single episode of Let's Get It On, John will answer your questions. Ask away via email, info@letsgetitonpodcast.com. Again, that's info@letsgetitonpodcast.com. Remember that you can download and subscribe to our podcast on the iTunes Store. For Android, download the Stitcher app and subscribe. And you can go straight to our website, letsgetitonpodcast.com. Well, I think that all of you listening to this program know that I am no longer the play-by-play commentator for Bellator, a job that I've held since January 2010 and for 127 straight events. At this time, I am not in a position to speak about the situation, and I truly hope that everyone listening respects and understands this. What I will say is that this podcast, Let's Get It On, will most definitely continue. This show is and always has been completely independent of Bellator and Spike and is part of Ignotainment Media Network.
Well, there's something I want to say. Sean, first off, you not being there anymore it's sad for me because you're my friend. And so I am saying this from a friend's point of view, but I'm saying it with all the truth and honesty I can. You are absolutely the best at what you do. There's several guys that understand MMA when it comes to a play-by-play guy, and you are one of them. You're one of two. And
Thank you.
I'm gonna miss you, dude. I'm gonna miss hearing you, but I know that you're gonna be, coming back, being part of MMA in another, place, and that place will be absolutely as lucky as they can be to have someone like you.
John, thank you, brother. That really means a lot to me. Well, this past Saturday in Las Vegas, Conor McGregor defeated Chad Mendes by second-round TKO to claim the UFC's interim featherweight world title. Since making his debut in the UFC in April 2013, McGregor has established himself as one of the biggest stars for the promotion and in the sport of mixed martial arts. John, this was a great and a really gutty win by McGregor, but there are still a lot of MMA fans out there who are simply not convinced. Their claim is that McGregor is really more about hype than he is about actual talent.
Really? Who are those people? Come on, tell me.
There are a lot.
Those people, man. Really, a lot.
Look on social media. A lot.
Good. Let's just say that there's a lot of freaking morons out there. Okay, if you think Conor McGregor is someone that can't fight, you are not freaking very intelligent when it comes to the fight game. That dude is unbelievable. There's things about him that make him so impressive and that he does better than any other person out there right now. Look at one thing he's got power. He hits hard. You can see when he hits somebody, it affects them, and you can see the look on their face like, oh hell, that just freaking blasted me. I can't have that happen again. And that starts to alter that person's game as far as them coming towards Conor. He hits hard. He understands distance and range incredibly well. He understands, exactly how far he needs to be to avoid a shot and to then deliver that counter that he likes to do. He is absolutely fearless as far as the fight. He's so calm when he's fighting. Look at him. Look at how relaxed he is. When you're talking about fighting and people say, oh, this fighter's not in shape. Fighters are in shape when they go in, especially, you're looking at the big leagues. You're looking at the UFC. You're looking at Bellator. Those fighters are in shape when they're going into that cage. There's elements that start to take away from that conditioning. And part of that is nerves. And the inability to control those nerves and to control the adrenaline that is, going through your body ends up draining a lot of fighters. Conor McGregor doesn't have that happen. He got blasted by Chad Mendes multiple times in that fight and acted like it was nothing and kept talking to Chad saying, "Is that all you got?" Well, when you're Chad and you're hitting this guy with everything you have that has knocked down other people before, and then you hit him with this shot and the guy continues to just walk forward and pressure you and tell you, "Is that all you got?" In your head, you're going, "God damn, what do I have to do to hurt this guy?" So people can say whatever they want, and there's going to always be people that love Conor McGregor and there's going to be people that hate Conor McGregor. And I think Conor McGregor wants both. He wants the guys that love him to watch him, and he wants the guys that hate him to watch him, because that's going to end up putting money in his pocket. He is a phenomenal fighter.
John, I was going to make the comparison, and I don't want to talk about talent, but just about hype and build-up and spectacle to Muhammad Ali in boxing and what he did in the 60s and in the 70s. But you just made me think even more so, is that all you got? George Foreman tells the famous story about the Rumble in the Jungle in Zaire, 1974. Foreman is the indestructible world champion, and he is banging away at the body of Ali, and Ali keeps whispering to Foreman in his ear, "Is that all you got, boy? Is that all you got?" And later, Foreman said, "I thought to myself, yeah, that's pretty much
that's
all
about
I
it."
got." And
yes, it is.
It's dangerous when you take a legend like Muhammad Ali, and I know some people are going to say, "What are you doing comparing Ali to McGregor?" Let's not talk about talent. Let's just talk about hype. When he was Cassius Clay, when he became Muhammad Ali, the criticisms were the same as Conor McGregor. It's a lot of flash. There's no substance. This is a media creation. The sport wants him to succeed. This guy is more famous for the way he talks than the way he fights. Muhammad Ali proved the world wrong. The question is, will Conor McGregor prove the MMA world wrong? Has he already?
I think he has already. What's funny is you sit here and you talk about that, and yesterday I had to go do this thing for a company that I work with, Celebrity Sweat. They're awesome. They do all this charity work for people, and I end up getting to work out with athletes in all these different sports. And so I'm with two guys from the LA Kings, Matt Green and Kyle Clifford, and I do that whole shoot and I do the workout with them, and then I'm going to come down to San Diego to get ready for the UFC fight that is tonight, and I end up calling my dad because he's on the way down to San Diego. I say, "Hey, do you want to meet up and have some lunch or something?" Right? And he says, "Absolutely." And so I meet up with him, and the first person he starts talking about is Conor McGregor, and the first person he compares him to is Muhammad Ali. And he hated Muhammad Ali because he thought Muhammad Ali talked too much, and now he's sitting there and he's hating Conor McGregor because he talks too much. And I go, "You are a dinosaur that will never change." But he got that same comparison. And I said, "Let me ask you a question." I go, "Do you understand what Muhammad Ali was doing?" Right? And he goes, "I understand what he was doing, but he didn't have to say some of the things he said." I go, "Look I want you to figure this out. Fighting is about more than physical. It's way into the mental side. And in fact, I will tell you it's at least 90% mental." I said, "And when you hate somebody, when you absolutely despise that person, you want to hurt them and you're mad at them, that is not a good thing for you to be. And that is a good thing for them. So if I can sit here and say things that makes you just want to rip my head off of my shoulders, and then you go and try, at least I know, hey, go ahead, waste that energy, because you can't do it. You can't rip my head off my shoulders. It ain't going to happen. So go ahead, waste your energy, because all that anger that you are displaying right now is burning you out, and it's helping me win." And that's what Muhammad Ali used to do, and that is what Conor McGregor does. And you know what? You need to learn to play the game like they have figured it out. Conor is a marketing machine. He is good at it. He's got a great personality. He says great things when he talks. If you listen to him, he doesn't bullshit. He doesn't lie. He'll start to talk about a fighter, and he'll actually say the true things about that fighter as far as where that fighter has some flaws. And, like him, hate him, all I can tell you is, as someone that is near him and sees him and understands fighting, Conor McGregor is a real deal. Conor McGregor is a tough dude, and he's going to be here for a long time.
I think people need to understand that in any sport, individual sports, team sports, fighting, NFL, soccer, it doesn't matter. The athletes who get booed the loudest also get cheered for the most. You know, you don't take the marginal guy and people are booing him. It just doesn't happen. No one's booing the third string quarterback in the NFL. They're booing Peyton Manning and they're booing Tom Brady because the home fans are cheering them with the same amount of passion and lust. That's what Conor McGregor brings out in people. That's what Ali brought out in people. You either love him or you hate him, but you simply do not ignore him.
You look at what he did in that fight with Chad. You know, people ask me about the fight, and I don't make predictions. I'm not going to do that. But I told them that there were certain elements, and they said, "Well, do you think Chad will get him down?" I said, "There's not a doubt in my mind Chad will end up taking Conor down." Conor plays a game where he stands sideways a lot. It's hard for you to get, a good sprawl sometimes with some of the angles that he takes and some of the footwork that he utilizes. I said, the question is, can Chad keep him down? And how much energy is Chad going to use in just keeping him down instead of damaging him? That's going to be your question. And, the one thing that if you look at that fight, Chad did a good job. Chad was trying. Chad absolutely had what I call an adrenaline dump. You could see where he was amped. He was ready to go, going after him. And then all of a sudden he started breathing hard. And a lot of people are going to say, well, it's because, he only had a 2-week camp and stuff. No, there's no way that Chad Mendes, I don't even care if he has no camp, can't go 5 minutes without starting to breathe hard. It's an adrenaline dump, and it happens. And it's part of that whole emotion. When we start to bring in emotion into this and we start to have feelings of, I want to hurt this guy. I want him to feel me. Those things can start to play into it. But the whole hype train and everything of people saying, well, he's nothing. Look, I'm not saying Conor can't be beat. Everybody that walks can be beat.
And he's been beaten twice.
And the right person.
And he's been beaten twice and submitted twice, granted early in his career. But There's not that unbeaten aura. But then MMA never will be about the undefeated aura. We're not boxing where you better be 18-0 or you're not going to have a career.
Exactly. Everything about MMA, and this is what people were questioning, and I didn't blame them for questioning, is they were looking at Conor and saying, well, who has he really fought? And my thing was, when he first got into the UFC, I had seen him fight. I think it was Cage Rage that he fought. And I had seen him fight, and I said, you know what, the kid's got skill. He's going to be a good fighter. And then he came in, and I think he fought Marcus Brimage. And, he looked great. But again, I looked and I said, all right, he's not that A-level fighter. But when he fought Max Holloway, I'm telling you, Sean, Max Holloway is the real deal. Max Holloway is a stud. That kid can fight. And Conor won every round with Max Holloway. And that was the point where I went, hey, this kid can fight. This guy, he talks a lot, man. He can fight. And then, he ends up, getting the fight with Diego Brandao. He destroys Diego. Diego's a tough guy. And then he ends up with Dennis Seaver. And then he ends up with, he ends up with Dustin Poirier first. And Dustin Poirier is a very good fighter. Dustin is a stud. And, that fight went, less than one round. And he ends up with Seaver, and now Chad Mendes, and everyone was saying, well, we'll see what happens when he fights a wrestler. Well, dude, he fought a wrestler, and he fought a freaking great wrestler. He fought a guy that's, only had a loss. His only losses are to one guy. Now he's got the two. But, he's the real deal. And you know what? Accept him, hate him, love him. I don't care. But understand, he's going to be here.
Every week here on Let's Get It On, we bring you our poll question. You can, of course, cast your vote on our website, letsgetitonpodcast.com. So here we go with this week's poll question. Do you feel that Conor McGregor is currently the biggest male star in MMA? Vote yes or no at letsgetitonpodcast.com. We're saying male star because it's tough for anyone really to argue that Ronda Rousey isn't the biggest star in all of mixed martial arts. And also, as you think about casting your vote yes or no, we're not talking about retired fighters. So don't factor in Royce Gracie and Chuck Liddell and Randy Couture into the mix. Think about current male fighters in the UFC, Bellator, World Series of Fighting, one championship across all promotions. Who right now is a bigger star outside of the sport, inside the sport, male than Conor McGregor? John, I can't think of one. Can you?
No, because there isn't. Look at when if you were at the MGM Grand on Saturday night for 189 and you looked around the hotel and saw it was Little Ireland. Okay, there was more Irish people there. These people, and when you look at, this is what was impressive about Conor and that he marketed that fight with Aldo. He wanted that fight with Aldo. Aldo ends up pulling out, and that's okay. I understand why Aldo did. That's not saying anything bad about him. He wants to come in and not be injured. I don't blame him. And they bring in Chad Mendes, a completely different fighter. That's not an easy thing for Conor. And he takes the fight right away. And he takes the fight based upon, he's thinking about all the people that are coming over from Ireland that have saved their money, that have worked very hard for this money that they're going to put on a plane ticket and tickets and hotel rooms and the meals. And man, I'll tell you what, that place was packed with people from Ireland. So let's take a look at other fighters and see who's bringing people over in that manner, to watch them fight. It's a lot cheaper to watch Conor. If you have to, do it on pay-per-view, you can get it for, $55 or $50, whatever it is. That's a lot cheaper than doing all those things, of plane tickets, hotel rooms, meals, tickets for the fights. And he's got that following. He's got people coming to watch him. And there's nobody that, look at Chad Mendes is an American. I hate to tell you, the MGM Grand is in Las Vegas, and that's America. And that place had way more Irish people than it had Americans, for that fight. And that's saying something about his popularity.
John, I've wondered with Conor McGregor having an outstanding performance. He had to show a lot of great tenacity. He wasn't just a front runner in that fight, which he's been accused of throughout his 5 previous UFC fights, just being a front runner holding the lead. You hear that a lot, is a criticism of fighters who win. They're front runners. How do they do with adversity? Conor McGregor did extremely well with adversity thrown at him by Chad Mendes in that top control and takedowns. But with still the negativity on McGregor after this win, saying the UFC needs a new star, they're building him up, it's a lot more flash than substance. What would the outcry be if he had actually lost this fight? It would be like Kimbo Slice Part 2 almost, when Kimbo was in Elite XC.
Oh, absolutely. People would say, I told you he sucks, It's like, hey, that's for people, and people always want to say that they were right in what they were thinking. To say that he's, blown up or they want him to win. Of course they want him to win. Let's be honest. This is a business, okay? And this guy, just in how many fights, let's say 5 fights, 6 fights in the UFC, he ends up selling a show out in Las Vegas that they get the biggest gate that they've ever gotten with any fighter. Brock Lesnar, Ronda Rousey, Randy Couture, Chuck Liddell, I don't care who, Cain Velasquez, Junior Dos Santos, none of them have ended up selling tickets the way that Conor McGregor did. Well, if you're a businessman, is that an important aspect to you? Absolutely. That's how you make your money. That's how you put on more fights. And obviously, if you're looking at a guy saying, wow, which guy do I want to win? Well, if you're the businessman, you're saying, I want Conor McGregor to win because he's selling tickets. He's, putting money in my pocket too. I'm going to put money in his, and he's going to put money in mine. So, there's people complaining saying, oh, the UFC wanted him to win. Of course they wanted him to win. Don't be stupid. The world is about, making things happen in business. And if you don't think fighting is a business, you're nuts.
My good friend who I speak to just about every single day of my life, UFC founder Art Davey, who's a good friend of yours, your wife's Elaine's. We talked about Conor McGregor, and it led us into the conversation of how Art was able to find fighters. Some were very good. Some were not great, like Tank Abbott and Kimo Leopoldo, but they're stars. It strikes me as insane how many people who know nothing about MMA know who Tank Abbott is, David Tank Abbott. And you have to have that intangible quality. Dave Beneteau was a great fighter from that era, but not a lot of people outside the hardcores remember Dave Beneteau. You and I do. Maybe people listening to this show do. But a lot more people remember Tank Abbott, Kimo Leopoldo. Talk about fighters like that. The UFC needs stars. MMA needs stars. All professional sports, even college sports, they need stars. So I agree with you. Just because a promotion or a league wants a certain team or an athlete to win doesn't mean that they're working anything or anything is fixed or there's collusion. But ultimately, they're businesses, and all sports at all levels need stars to sustain that business.
Exactly. I mean, look if you don't have stars, you don't have eyes. Stars bring eyes on your product. That's what makes you money. That's what helps you grow. It's just, this is just basic business.
John, so last thing on Conor McGregor. He's now the UFC's interim featherweight champion. Can you imagine when, not if, but when the titles are unified? I mean, this really could be the biggest pay-per-view in the history of the UFC. And Fox Broadcasting would love this fight because they would probably get an audience of 12 to 15 million. Promise you it's not going to be on Fox. It's going to be on pay-per-view. But this is going to be huge. It's going to be insane. It's going to be like maybe you do it maybe you do it in Dublin and you do it outside and you sell 60,000 tickets.
You know what? I don't think they've already said, Dana's already come out saying it will be in Las Vegas. And, it depends on when, Jose, heals himself up and can get back to training. The big question for, I think people are looking at Jose Aldo and saying, well, he pulled out because there were, it wasn't so much that he pulled out for the rib injury that he couldn't fight. He would have been able to fight. He would have been in pain, no doubt about it. Would he have been at 100%? No, but no fighter's usually at 100%. The real thing was, and what he was looking at is, Jose walks around at 175 pounds. He had to lose weight to get to 135. Well, his workouts were being diminished, and his ability to, actually lose weight to get himself down to the weight that he's the champion of was going to be very difficult, and he probably wasn't going to make it. So he made an educated choice and made a decision to say, you know what, I've got to pull myself out of this fight, because if I don't make 145, and he's got to be at no bigger than 145, he can't be 145.1, 145.2. He's in trouble if he does that. So he needed to make that weight, and he realized, I don't think I'm going to make that weight. I'm going to have to pull myself out. And when you're looking at him pulling himself out, people can sit there and say, oh, that was, he's afraid. There's no way Jose Aldo is afraid of Conor McGregor. He gave up a lot of money in his pocket to give up that fight so he could come and do what he's supposed to do the right way as the champion, making weight, doing things in a professional fashion. So, that fight, although it was canceled, it is now going to be even bigger than it was when it was this first time that we were waiting for. It's going to be huge. That fight is going to be the most watched UFC fight ever.
And by no means am I a conspiracy theorist. I think with our talks about shoots and works on this program, everyone listening knows that neither you nor I, John, are conspiracy theorists. But to your point, this worked out really, really well for all parties involved.
Oh, it did. For Conor McGregor, it worked out well. He's going to make a ton more money. For Jose Aldo, it didn't work out well as far as he's missing one payday, but he's going to get a hell of a second payday. Okay, that worked out well. For the UFC, it works out great because they're going to end up, again, they're going to market the hell out of it, and they're going to end up with a huge, huge event.
And I think even Chad Mendes comes out pretty well. People, the Chad Mendes supporters say, great fight. Short notice, he stepped up, so much character. And it goes back to, we're not record obsessed in MMA like they're record obsessed in boxing.
Exactly. That's the whole thing. Look at Chad Mendes is a stud. Man, that guy takes a fight against a real guy. And look at Chad knew going in. He goes, he knows he's going to sit there and he's going to say certain things, but he knows Conor's a real deal. This is going to be a tough fight. And he's taking it on short notice. And, he did the UFC a huge favor. And he did himself a huge favor because they're going to remember it. He has set himself up with that company forever. I don't think you'll ever see Chad going anywhere else. And, people are going to want to see Chad fight. Chad is a stud. And to step up and take that fight the way he did, and to put on the performance, because he went after him with everything he had, you can't ask anything more from a guy.
Every week here on Let's Get It On, John and I answer your questions. Ask away whatever you'd like. Submit them via email, info@letsgetitonpodcast.com. And, of course, please include a pronunciation guide for your name. First up, Nathan Hendrickson, who's a loyal listener listener listens every single episode with his daughter, Natalie. Nathan writes, and it flows beautifully into what we've just been discussing, John. Much has been made of Jose Aldo pulling out of the Conor McGregor fight and belts being taken away. Cain Velasquez lost his belt and had to fight for an interim belt because it took so long for him to fight due to his injuries. Under what circumstances, John, does a fighter in the UFC or Bellator lose his or her belt?
Well, yeah. All right. There's a mistake in what Nathan said there. He said that Cain Velasquez, lost his belt. He never lost his belt. John Jones lost his belt. All right. There's the one where you can look and say that the UFC went and took away John Jones's light heavyweight championship based upon personal issues and criminal matters that they felt he needed to take care of, and he was going to be out for a while. He was not meeting the code of conduct that he signed as part of his contract for the UFC, so they stripped him of his belt. And when Dan Cormier fought Anthony Johnson, that was not for an interim title. That was for the UFC's light heavyweight championship. So that's a true stripping. When you look at someone like Jose Aldo, who ends up, he's been the only featherweight champion of the UFC. He was the featherweight champion of the WEC. They absorbed the WEC into the UFC and opened up the featherweight class and handed him a UFC, featherweight championship belt. And he has held on to it ever since. Now, they end up having this fight with Conor McGregor and Chad Mendes, and because Jose couldn't come and fight, was injured with a rib injury, they ended up making it a interim championship fight. What does that really mean? Nothing. Doesn't mean anything. There's one champion. When Cain Velasquez was the champion and couldn't fight Verdum, they made the Verdum versus Hunt fight an interim champion. And what does it mean? Nothing. Who's the champion? Was it Verdum or was it Velasquez? Well, Velasquez was the champion because you got to beat the man to be the man. And then Verdum goes and he beats the man and he is the man. And that's exactly what's going to happen with Conor McGregor and Jose Aldo. Conor's going to have to fight the man. And if he beats the man, he is the man. And if he doesn't, then Jose Aldo remains the man. The interim belt is just a way for them to continue with championship fights. People want to see championship fights. They want to see that belt on the line. And when you have a champion that's down and down for a while, that belt becomes stagnant and it affects your ability to do matchmaking. So the reason for the interim belt is to help your matchmaker make matches that people are going to want to see.
Our next question comes from Eric McGracken. John, given that some fights cause so much damage that they irreparably harm athletes, and given that PED use is prohibited, what do you make of the argument that a PED-using athlete, that's of course performance-enhancing drugs, PED-using athlete exposes themselves, in addition to sanctions from the relevant athletic commission, to criminal charges and civil lawsuits for damages based on fraud and assault?
That's a heady question right there. Eric is a smart guy. That's a lawyer. I know Eric, from Vancouver, man. That's a smart guy. And what he's saying is, you can look at letter of the law, spirit of the law. This is the way I look at it. Now, I don't like anyone that cheats. As far as, I always say, if you're not cheating, you're not trying. But when it comes to PEDs, I don't like it.
It's different than grabbing the cage to defend it.
Absolutely. Exactly. That's the difference. That's what I'm talking about when I say, if you're not cheating, you ain't trying. All right. But when it comes to PEDs, you're showing a side of you that says, I can't do this without it. I need something to put me over. I need something to build my confidence. I need something to make me be a guy that can compete at the top level. Well, since you know that substance is not allowed and you then want to go and use it, you're a cheater and you're someone that needs to have, things done to you as far as your license needs to be taken. You need to have financial, things put against you. And, you need to sit down for a while and not be able to make a living, because this is what fighters are doing. When fighters are fighting, they're making a living, and their time for employment is a short window. And so when we punish them and we suspend them for a year, 2 years, 3 years, they're even talking about 4 years. You are impacting that fighter's life in an incredible, way. It's like putting them in jail. And that's enough in my mind. I don't think you need to bring actual, criminal law into the cage. There are things that happen all the time. I just had, the Magalhães fight. Cal Magalhães fights Josh Salmon, and Josh wins the fight, chokes him out, and then he goes and he spits and blows his nose at Josh, and it ends up on me. So it really didn't hit Josh, but it ends up on me. That's an assault. That's not part of sport. That's not sportsmanlike. That's an assault. That's a criminal act. But do I think he should go to jail for it? No. Look at, I understand the context of why it happens. And he's upset. He got beat. He didn't like something, and he decides to take this action in the heat of the moment. And he's wrong, and he made a mistake, and he's going to end up paying for that mistake. He's going to end up paying the commission who's going to fine him for that mistake. And so he is being punished, and that's all that needs to be done. We don't need to bring – there's been very few things that I would ever tell you should happen where you bring the actual criminal aspect and legal authorities into the world of MMA or boxing. There have been times when fighters have done things. There was the boxer, I can't remember his name, but after the fight is over. The other guy wins, and the other guy goes over to shake his hand, and the guy, you see him set up, and he punches him right across the jaw, breaks his jaw. That's a criminal act. The fight was over. There was nothing there, and you assaulted him, and he ended up, I think, going to jail. So those things can happen, but when it comes to PEDs, I think that we're handling them the right way.
Keep your excellent questions coming. We read them every week. info@letsgetitonpodcast.com. Still to come on this week's episode of Let's Get It On, Big John and I will discuss Robbie Lawler's successful and epic title defense versus Rory MacDonald, which John, of course, refereed and which is being called one of the greatest fights in UFC history. And we'll discuss media reports first coming out of Russia that 38-year-old Fedor Emelianenko is set to make his return to MMA. With Big John McCarthy, I'm Sean Wheelock, and you are listening to Let's Get It On. It's the book that Wrestling Observer calls a must-read for any MMA fan. Jonathan Snowden of Bleacher Report describes as riveting and amazing, and TheFightNerd.com says nothing is held back. Pick this book up right away. Is This Legal? The inside story of the first UFC from the man who created it, written by UFC founder Art Davie and me, Sean Wheelock, with the foreword by John McCarthy, is now available to listeners of this podcast at the special price of $12.48. That's far less than you'll pay for the book on Amazon and half price of what you'll pay in store at Barnes & Noble. Buy it directly from the publisher now online at ascendbooks.com and enter the promo code LEGAL50. That's ASCEND books.com, promo code LEGAL50. Learn the true story of how the UFC came into existence in the book that Randy Couture describes as honest, shocking, and enthralling, and that has a rating of 4.9 out of 5 stars from Amazon Reader Reviews. Is This Legal? The inside story of the first UFC from the man who created it, by UFC founder Art Davie and me, Sean Wheelock, with the foreword by Big John McCarthy. Available now online at ascendbooks.com for just $12.48 when you use the promo code LEGAL50. Hey, this is Sean Wheelock.
And this is Big John McCarthy.
If you're a fan of our show, then you're going to love the rest of the Ignotainment podcast lineup.
Like the Ocho Man behind the 8 Ball and the Whiskey Philosopher with Jeff Cooper.
You can find these great podcasts and more at ignotainment.com. Thanks again and enjoy the rest of the program.
Let's get it on!
When looking for new and exciting clothing concepts, look no further than Lambs to Lions. Lambs to Lions has great designs that incorporates the past from boxing with the new and exciting evolution of MMA. We all start out as lambs, but with time, training, and hard work, we can all become lions. Be part of the Lambs to Lions movement and check out all of their great designs. You can get your Lambs to Lions gear at the Las Vegas Fight Shop or go to lambstolionsbrand.com.
Now, back to Let's Get It On with your hosts, Big John McCarthy and Sean Wheelock.
Well, it's the bout that Dana White said wasn't the fight of the night, but rather the fight of the ever. Very clever, Dana White. I like that. Robbie Lawler's fifth-round TKO win over Rory MacDonald last Saturday in Las Vegas at UFC 189, which gave Lawler his first successful defense of the UFC Welterweight Championship. John, you, of course, were the referee of what has been widely hailed, and I think rightly so, as an absolute instant classic.
Oh, God. Absolutely an incredible fight. And it built because, it started off fairly slow. In the first round, they were feeling each other out. They're trying to figure out, foot placement and movement and how they were going to cut an angle and to, do what they're going to do, because since Robbie is a southpaw and Rory is a standard, stance fighter. And it just kept building and building and building. And the longer it went, the more that was happening and the more that, I was having to deal with because, I'm not looking at the fight like everybody else. There's a lot going on in that fight that most people don't understand. But it was absolutely, by the end, with the ebbs and flows and the things that occurred of, guys getting hurt and then coming back, it was absolutely an incredible fight. I don't know, the fight of ever. I kind of like that one.
John, as a broadcaster, so many times I've said, oh, really fun fight. To me, a fun fight isn't necessarily a great fight. A great fight to me has to be competitive, where one fighter's about to win, then he's about to lose, and the other's about to win, and he's about to lose. When I did in season 3 of Bellator, September 2010, Joe Warren versus Joe Soto, that was a great fight, because Soto won almost a 10-7 round in round 1, and then Warren comes back and knocks unconscious Joe Soto in round number 2. That was a great fight because you're not sure. So for me, back and forth over 5 rounds, you were never quite sure who had the advantage. The momentum kept swinging. 2 phenomenal fighters going all out. That is absolutely a great fight. Right now, either that or LC Davis versus Hidoro Tokoro in Bellator, fight of the year. And I think I would give this fight the nod, even though I didn't commentate it.
Yeah, they're 2 completely different fights. And, the LC Davis Tokoro fight, God, I love that fight. It was phenomenal. And just, so many different elements of MMA involved. And in this fight, there really wasn't that many elements of what we do in MMA involved. Rory shot for a couple of takedowns, and you could see that in his game plan, he was going to end up making at least Robbie have to deal with the thought of being taken down. But Robbie stopped him so easily on all of those takedown attempts. They weren't even close. And, it got to the point that Robbie actually hurt Rory on one of the takedown attempts, and he really stopped doing it because of that fact that I don't like what happened there. But if you're looking at, Rory MacDonald, what a stud. Here's this young guy. His nose was crushed in the first round. His nose was broken. He ended up getting a small cut, and, he fought, as he was fighting, in that first round, the real question for me was, I'm not judging the fight, but as I'm in there and what I'm seeing, Rory is touching Robbie. And when I say touching, he's hitting Robbie more than Robbie is hitting Rory. But the shots that Robbie is landing on Rory have more power. They have more impact. They're doing a little bit more damage. And it was a real question. I wonder which way the judges are going to go in that round, because I looked at it. It was, Robbie's landing the heavier blows. Rory is being busy. And then as the rounds went on, the third round, where Rory had a chance, man, he hurt him. That head kick, because you saw Robbie was usually very smart as far as the way he blocks a kick. He doesn't usually block a head kick with one hand. He brings his other hand over to check that and to take some of that torque and power off of it. And he missed with his off hand, and he got blasted. And you saw him take the stiff-legged and stumble look, and Rory went after him. And the shot that he hit him on the head with the elbow, that gash was a good 3 inches long. He blasted him. And then the shot he hit him with the left elbow that cut his lip, he put the wood to him. And, you look at that, and maybe if, that round is a little bit longer, 15, 30 seconds more, he might have had the time to put Robbie away, but it wasn't there. And then, come the 4th round, he's putting it on Robbie in the beginning, but then Robbie comes back and he's putting it on Rory at the end. And that was one of those rounds I'm like, holy Christ, which way is this going to go? They're standing there looking at each other, and Rory, he doesn't want to move because he doesn't want to turn. And all I'm thinking in my head at the time is, God damn it, get back to your corner so the cut man can work on you, dude. You need this time. And that's really what I was thinking, because I'm thinking of not so much, the moment of time and what's going on. I'm thinking of both of you need to get to your damn corners so those, so Stitch and Mike can get to work on you, because their hands are full with what they got.
John, coming in, I really thought that Robbie Lawler was getting virtually zero respect in the MMA world, maybe from fighters who definitely know these things, but from the media, even from hardcore fans, that he was less than a champion, almost like he was a placeholder champion. I would go so far as to say I think Lawler before this fight was the most lightly regarded UFC champion since Tim Sylvia. I really hope, and I don't use that word lightly, I hope, because Robbie Lawler is such a quality person, that changes now. The people will say, you're not just the guy who was kind of in that era after George St. Pierre left and before the next great welterweight came in. Robbie Lawler had a tough run in his career. He went 2-4 at one stage. He has 10 career losses in mixed martial arts, but I think he proved in this fight, and I think it'll stand as a turning point in his career, that he every bit deserves to be that UFC welterweight champion.
Oh my God. Look, everybody matures at a different rate, and everyone figures things out in life at a different speed. And when it comes to Robbie, if you look at Robbie's career, Robbie was a young kid, and he was put into the spotlight because he was this very strong, very fast, hard-hitting kid from the Militich fighting systems, and he had Pat behind him, he had Matt Hughes behind him, Tim Sylvia talking him up, and Dana fell in love with him because of the way that he fought. He watched him fight in Iowa and brings him in. And if you go all the way back, UFC 37.5, okay, they put on a special show to be on the Best Damn Sports Show. That was the first time they were ever on basic, regular TV. And Robbie Lawler was really the headliner for that show. The headliner for the main card, as far as what people saw at the show, was Chuck Liddell against Vitor Belfort. But the one that was the main event for that Best Damn Sports Show was Robbie Lawler versus Steve Berger. And, that was the beginning. Robbie had his first fight in the UFC against Riley. And Aaron Riley is a tough dude, and they bombed each other in that fight. And, that set Robbie up as people saying, man, this guy is something. And he was, but he was too young to understand what he had. And it took him, losing it. And he ended up, fighting was something that he didn't love. It was something he did to make money. And he ended up not really training at it. He was lifting weights instead of, getting better technically so he could be a better fighter. And he was going and, fighting in, Rumble on the Rock or Super Brawl in Hawaii. And then he ended up, with Elite XC. And then he ends up getting his contract bought out by Strikeforce. And all of those fights, he's a good fighter. It's just that he's not training as a fighter. And when he finally had the chance to get back to the UFC, he had just gone and started training at ATT down in Florida. And that has been the difference in Robbie Lawler. That moment that he said, you know what, I'm leaving his comfort zone, because he was with Militich and then he was with Matt Hughes at, I think it was Hit Squad. And he ends up going to ATT. That's the moment that Robbie Lawler changed as a fighter forever. That's the moment that Robbie Lawler became a contender and then a champion of the future.
It's really an amazing career arc, and you got to be careful to talk about these things in past tense, because Robbie Lawler is very much active. He's got a lot of fights and a lot of years ahead of him. Yeah, and he's pretty good, and he's the UFC welterweight champion. But just look at this place in time. Here's a prodigy who then is tagged as a journeyman, who then is like, well, he's kind of a contender, and now people are saying, wow, this probably is the best welterweight in the world. Forget the organization. This guy is phenomenal. I'll tell you, though, John, if Robbie Lawler loses this fight, I think history will kind of just dismiss Robbie Lawler as really that placeholder guy, which to me is incredibly unfair. This is really a turning point in my eyes.
I absolutely agree with everything you said. And, the thing is, Robbie in the past lost those fights that he had with Rory MacDonald because it just wasn't the same guy. And now, he knows where he's at. He knows what he's doing. He knows what he's got. And he knows I need to hold on to it. And he's doing everything within his power to do things the right way so he can make that happen. And that's everything. Again, everyone has their own time schedule and everyone does things a little bit different. Robbie's an older fighter, but he is absolutely fighting the best that he has ever fought. He is better now than he ever was before, and he carries a lot of the great things that he had in the past he's bringing with him, because the one thing that's never going to leave Robbie is Robbie hit like a truck. That dude has got power, and that's never going to leave him, but his hands are faster now than they were before. You look at that jab that he was hitting Rory with. That jab was the difference maker in that fight. That jab that Robbie Lawler was hitting Rory with continuously was the difference in Robbie winning that fight or losing that fight.
John, final thing on this, and I know as a commentator when I've done some really special bouts, starting in Pride and all the way through my Bellator run, I had these moments where I would think, kind of subconsciously, wow, I'm kind of part of something special. This is really cool. Did you allow yourself that moment? Have you ever allowed yourself that moment, or do you only recognize that after the fight is over and kind of the adrenaline is worn off?
I recognize how good the fight is during it, and it's, especially when it got past that fourth round, I was like, oh my God, this thing is epic. And, after the fight was over and I stopped it with Rory and, Dana came in and Dana looked at me and he goes, holy shit, right? And I was like, yeah. I said, and I told him, I gave him the line, I said, well, you just inducted your first Hall of Fame fight today. I said, you just saw your next one tonight, meaning, hey, this thing is, if you want a Hall of Fame fight, that fight, Robbie Lawler and Rory MacDonald will someday be in the UFC Hall of Fame for that fight.
Oh, there's no question. Well, the Russian website Union MMA was the first to report that the great Fedor Emelianenko is now training for a comeback to mixed martial arts at age 38. The former Pride heavyweight champion, who went 9.5 years without a loss, hasn't fought since June 2012 when he knocked out Pedro Hizo in the first round. John, for me, Fedor Emelianenko is absolutely the greatest fighter in the brief history of our sport, which is about 22.5 years old. But, man, there are a lot of questions surrounding if Fedor can come back. And even if Fedor were 28, if he could recapture what he had, just because this sport moves so incredibly fast.
It's evolving and things are changing. And I don't know. I've known for a while, and I haven't said anything, but I've known for a while that Fedor was coming back. I have a good relationship with Fedor. He's a very good guy. And, when we see each other, we talk a little bit. And I knew he was coming back, and it's a double-edged sword for me, because I would love to see him fight again, because I love the way that he went about competing. He was very much like Randy Couture to me in that he was very smart. He was very cerebral. He didn't let emotions get it. The whole thing with the undefeated and unbeaten streak, he just looked at it as someday it'll come to an end. And he didn't care, because it's like, this is just, it's just probabilities. It's just the way it's going to be. And so when he finally lost to Fabricio Verdum, he handled it in such a way, I think the statement that he said at the time was, every man falls. He goes, not every man gets up. And I love that line. And I was like, God damn it, that's why I like that dude, and I want to see him fight, but I don't want to see him fight. I don't want to see him get hurt. I don't want to see someone, end up putting his pelt, because, Jimmy Smith on our show said, Jimmy and I have talked about it before. There's those different levels of as a fighter, and there's those different stages in your career. And, sometimes you're the young lion, and sometimes you're the old lion, and the young lions are searching for that pelt, and they're looking for your pelt because they want to put it on their wall. They want to be the guy that beat the legend. And, if Fedor comes back and they put him in smart fights, competitive fights, but smart fights, I'm all for it. If he came back and, they immediately, we'll say he goes to the UFC. I'm not saying that's where he's going, and they put him in with, somebody that is, a monster that they want to prove that Fedor wasn't that great fighter, that's going to be sad, and that's something I don't want to see.
John, bear me this analogy, because this makes me think with Fedor Emelianenko about his size. I remember when the NFL came out with like I think it was the 75th anniversary team, which has been a few years ago now, but it was the 75th anniversary history of the NFL. I think it came out in 1995. And I remember that there were offensive linemen from like the 30s and the 40s. And I thought, okay, I'm sure they were the best offensive linemen for that era, but they weighed 185 pounds. You can't compare eras. And with Fedor Emelianenko, we said this on the program last week. If he were an American or a Canadian kid now in his early 20s starting out, he would be pressured to fight at 185. Instead, this is a guy who is wrecking, not beating, but wrecking the best heavyweights in the world. Since he left the sport in 2012, since he was really at the top of his game, which is what, 2006, 2007, 2008, heavyweights have gotten so much bigger. Weight cuts have become so much more dramatic. Douglas Lima, who goes in as Bellator's welterweight world champion, walks at about 210. Fedor Emelianenko walks at about 230. It's insane. I just don't know if, and I'm forgetting the age and discounting 38 years old. It's almost like he's coming from a different generation of fighting, even though it hasn't been that long ago since he fought.
Well, the thing that worries me, when it comes to Fedor is this. Fedor lived off of not being the biggest guy. He was definitely not the biggest or the strongest. Before I ever, met Fedor, I always looked at him and said, man, he's got to have, some brute strength for the way he's able to control guys at times. And then I was able to roll with him. And I could tell you, it wasn't that he's that strong. I've rolled with guys that are way stronger than Fedor and guys that, have fought Fedor and Fedor beat. But, what made Fedor who he was he was fast. He was really fast, and he would try to explode into things and do things in an incredibly fast manner that you had to work hard to try to stay with him and stop what he's doing. And that is what I'm worried about when it comes to him coming back. Is the one thing that leaves us, as we get older, is speed. We just, and it's not, in huge, elements. It's little tiny elements that speed starts to diminish, and we're just not as quick. So when we go to throw the punch, it just doesn't get there quite as fast. So it misses instead of connecting. And when we go to, stop someone from hitting us, our reflexes are just a little bit slow. So instead of it missing us like it did before, now it's actually hitting us pretty flush. And that's the real question. How much speed does he have, especially if he's going to fight in the heavyweights? How much speed is he going to bring with him at 38 years of age?
And John, I really wonder what the career motivation is. Is it to make money? Is it to reestablish fame in MMA? Is it that he thinks that he can be a world champion?
No.
What do you think?
You know what? I know what it is. I know what it is because it's, it's part of fighting, and it's all of them. When you get to as stoic as Fedor was, and as stoic as he always is, there's a drug that you can only get one spot. There's no dealer on the street that can give it to you. No doctor can write you a prescription for it. And that drug is walking out in a big fight with the lights on and the music on, and the fans start to go crazy over your name being announced, and you're coming out. That's a drug you can get in only one spot. And that's when you are fighting. And when you stop fighting, the drug is gone. And it's a hard thing to get away from. It's that competitive, that competitive desire that guys have to compete, and then to have that moment. It's just that slight moment where they walk out and, man, there's nothing that can beat it. They're walking on water. They're special at that time. And it only happens infrequently in their life when they are walking out for that fight, and you miss the lights, you miss that moment. And that's what this is. It's not that I think, Fedor made a lot of money in his career. Now, I'm not sure that he got to keep all that money, and sure. I would, I could say a whole thing about, that whole situation, but I know that he's taken care of where he's at, and I know that he's beloved by certain politicians that are very up in the Russian government, and he's not in need of having to fight to put food on the table, but I think he's in need of fighting to feed his soul. And sometimes you just got to let guys go and do it, because that's the only thing that's going to feed that soul.
And John, I agree with everything you say, but I just wonder if being very good will be good enough. Will that feed his soul as a fighter, or does he have to be the best? Because he was the best for 9.5 years, man.
Well, yeah, obviously he's going to want to compete and be the best, and he's going to want to show that he is the best. And sometimes what we desire and what we achieve are two different things.
One thing I like so much about Fedor Emelianenko, and I'll regress for a moment. He's one of the few people that I really admired, and when I met, they were an even better person. I'll be honest with you, John. You're the exact same way. I admired you for, 15 or 20 years before we established our close friendship. You exceeded my expectations. Same with Fedor Emelianenko. I first met him when I was signed on in February of 2008 to be the M1 commentator. And we're in the hotel in Amsterdam, and Fedor Emelianenko's just hanging around because Dmitry Samoylov, who's one of his guys, and Kirill Sedelnikov, one of his guys, was fighting on that card. And he was just kind of standing unassumingly, wasn't that big. Wow, there's Fedor Emelianenko. In a sport of extremely nice and respectful people, I've always contended he was number one on that list. Forget best fighter ever, which I think he was the nicest, most humble, respectful person. I saw him at our Bellator event in St. Louis, and it was just so nice to see him, and he's so warm and smiling and gives me a hug. He's that guy, and it was almost like the anti-Mike Tyson. We talked earlier about Muhammad Ali. We talked about Conor McGregor. He gained his fame from almost not playing that character. It's
Absolutely.
insane how he
just
did
being
that.
so stoic.
Yeah, stoic. There was no menace. There was no trash talk. You witnessed it firsthand. You refereed his fights. I commentated his fights. We were fans of his. It's amazing how he built the persona by almost having that anti-persona.
And it worked, especially from where he's from and everything. He was, a lot of people look at Russians and they have ideas because of movies and TV and all these things, that they're so emotionless. No, they're not. But Fedor made it look that way. He made it look like, I'm here. Okay, we're gonna fight. I'm a little sleepy right now. I'll try to wake up when I get in the cage. I'm walking around. I'm looking at you, but it's okay. We're gonna have a nice time. And then as soon as he went to hit you, there was a lot of violence that came out of that stoic guy.
Two things on Fedor Emelianenko that I think about. One I saw and one I didn't see. The thing I didn't see with Jerry Millen, longtime U.S. Vice President of Pride, the man who hired me at Pride and took me to M1. He told me the story when I got to Pride that leading up, and they're trying to build heat and get interviews when Fedor Emelianenko is about to fight Mirko Cro Cop. So they put a camera in front of Cro Cop, and he's talking about he's going to kill Fedor, and he's going to do this and that, and against Russia, and it's Croatia, and just all this violence. And then they go to Fedor Emelianenko, and Jerry says, "What would you like to say?" And he said, "I'd like to wish him good luck." And that's Fedor Emelianenko. He just wasn't going to try to do anything. The other story, which I witnessed firsthand, I did the commentary for the international TV broadcast with Jimmy Smith. You did the commentary for the North American broadcast with Frank Trigg and I believe Jay Glazer when Fedor Emelianenko knocked out. Well, actually, he threw the right hand, and then he finished with the rear naked choke on Tim Sylvia. My favorite moment in the fight, I encourage everybody, find it on YouTube or MMA Core, Daily Motion. Watch the end of that fight. Fedor Emelianenko, in a very consoling, gentlemanly way, taps on Sylvia like, "Man, I'm sorry it didn't go your way tonight." Instead of doing a gravedigger or a throat slit, he taps him. Do you remember that moment, John?
Absolutely.
He taps him like, "Man, I'm sorry. It just didn't work out for you tonight. You tried your hardest, though, Tim.
Yeah,
well done.
You did good.
You did good. Not as good as me, but you did good. But it wasn't even demeaning. It was empathy is what it was. And that's why Fedor Emelianenko is and was Fedor Emelianenko. I hope he can be that guy again.
Dude, it's funny because I remember making the call on that when Fedor hit Tim with a right hand. Tim was coming into it, and he hit him straight in the middle of the face with a solid straight right. And I go, "It's over," and because Tim stiffened up and he went down, and then Fedor used what we call a short choke, a Fedor choke, bar arm choke, which is painful. And Tim tapped right away, and those are the moments and the fights that he had in Pride. That's what made Fedor special, and he'll always be a special guy. He'll always be, the two guys that I look at that I say those are the greatest fighters. I put them into two, and it's the matter of not so much that they were champions or anything like that. The fact that Fedor went basically 32 fights without losing is incredible, because every time he fights, he's not at his best. He's human, and he has days when he's going to fight when he's feeling really good, and he has days when he's going to fight when he feels not good at all. He feels pretty crappy, and he still somehow figures out a way to win. Anderson Silva is the other guy. Anderson Silva had those days. He had that day against Chael Sonnen, where everything was going bad for him. He had a rib injury going into it. Everything was working against him. He found a way to win, and that's what the greatest of all time does. That's what Anderson Silva and Fedor Emelianenko are to me, because of the way they were able to do it time and time and time again and always come out on top. That's what is something that people don't look at the way they should, and that's what makes them special.
We've been referencing the great Muhammad Ali on our broadcast today, and nobody, I think, wants to see Fedor Emelianenko like Muhammad Ali against Trevor Berbick. You don't want to see that, or even Muhammad Ali against Larry Holmes, where
that's the worst one.
They're 10 or 15% of themselves, like you feel bad for them. You just hope that you don't see that with Fedor Emelianenko, that he comes back. Even the Dan Henderson fight was tough for me to watch, and I really like Dan Henderson. It was just tough to see. And where is Fedor Emelianenko now? Maybe his body is healed. Look, Randy Couture proved that you can be very relevant well into your 40s, and Fedor Emelianenko never really took a beating in any of his fights. Even against Silva, it was stopped, and he was losing, but he never really took that beating. If you think about his losses, Verdum, he just got caught in a triangle. Henderson, I still think that was a weird sequence where he got caught and kind of flashed, but he didn't get pummeled. So maybe he has a lot left. It's just interesting to me, the speed of MMA and what he's going to bring, what he can accomplish, and where he's going to be viewed in history if things go poorly for him in this return.
Well, you know what? The one thing I will say is, as a man, you've got to be happy with yourself. And, he has a legacy, no doubt about it. That legacy is never going to change. He was absolutely a dominant heavyweight at a time when there was a promotion that had most of the really great heavyweights in it. He was the king. And anything he does now, yes, he lost to Verdum. Yes, he lost to Silva. Yes, he lost to Dan Henderson. The Dan Henderson fight is the one that I'm going to look at and say, that's going to be my problem with Fedor coming back is, he a lot of people said, oh, he lost to a smaller guy. What happened was he ended up going against a guy who matched speed. And again, speed kills. And
he lost to a faster guy, didn't he, John?
Yeah, and that's the problem is, when you look and, speed kills in this sport. And if you're living off of your speed being the thing that's going to make you what you are, okay, that's great. But you've got to match up against guys that are not these super-sized heavyweights at 265 pounds at weigh-in, and they're 285 pounds on the day of the fight, and you're actually, weighing in with jeans and a belt buckle at 229 pounds because you weigh basically, we'll say 221 pounds is your actual weight. That's a huge difference to give up, and hopefully that speed has stayed with you so you can utilize it to help you win that fight, because if that speed is gone, now you don't have the speed advantage. Now you don't have the strength advantage. Now you don't have the size advantage. You don't have many advantages your way.
John, last thing in pure speculation, but let's say Fedor returns and he plays Royce Gracie to somebody's Matt Hughes. Do you think that's it? You think it's one and done? Or do you think that he would persevere from a loss and maybe even a non-competitive loss?
I don't know. That's going to be that's a tough one to say. I think, any time that a guy goes out losing, they have this gnawing ache inside of them that tells them, I can't go out that way. So if that's what happens, I don't see him going out one and done. I see him trying to get something back to get that win. And that's just part of being a fighter, and the mentality of it all is I can't go out that way. I can't go out looking that way. So I don't know. Everything is about who does he sign with, and there's multiple promotions that he can sign with. They're going to end up paying him a lot of money because he's not going to just sign for nothing. And who does that promotion decide they put against him? Are they going to try to make this super fight right away, or are they going to try to say, I'm going to put you against somebody that matches up well with you? I'm going to put you against someone that's close to your size. I'm going to put you into with somebody that has, good skills that you're going to have to beat, but they're not that monster that I'm trying to have beat you.
Big John and I are back with you next week for an all-new episode of Let's Get It On, first available on Friday. Download and subscribe to our podcast on the iTunes Store. For Android, download the Stitcher app and subscribe. And you can go straight to our website, letsgetitonpodcast.com. You can also find us on social media, facebook.com/letsgetitonpodcast, and on Twitter @PodcastMMA for this show, and for us personally, @JohnMcCarthyMMA and @Sean Wheelock. To ask us a question, make a comment, or inquire about becoming a sponsor of Let's Get It On, email us at info@letsgetitonpodcast.com. Again, that's info@letsgetitonpodcast.com. For John McCarthy, our producer Chris Lakin, and our entire crew, I'm Sean Wheelock. Thanks for listening, everyone. This has been a presentation of Ignotainment Media Network, online at ignotainment.com.
Let's Get It On with Big John McCarthy and Sean Wheelock, only on the Ignotainment Media Network. Don't forget to leave a rating and review in the comments section of the iTunes Podcast Store. If you have questions, comments, or are interested in sponsoring the show, contact us at info@letsgetitonpodcast.com, or check out our additional lineup of podcasts, including Ocho Man, Behind the Eight Ball, The Whiskey Philosopher, and Youth Baseball Talk at ignotainment.com.